The video you are about to see begins with Bill Falloon alerting an audience that they just witnessed medical history, when three credentialed scientists just described biological age reversal in human beings. Over 1,000 people attended this Revolution Against Aging and Death conference, making it the largest immortality event ever. It is the first scientific conference where multiple methods of inducing meaningful reversals of human aging were presented. We open now with Bill Falloon's enthusiastic remarks.
Does this audience understand what just happened over the last 2 hours? Do you understand? You had three prestigious scientists who have cumulatively published hundreds of studies. But they've got proposals right now to reverse biological aging. Dr. Fahey, he's got the ongoing trial. Dr. Mahara and Dr. Kiproff, they're designing studies right now to reverse human aging. This is an absolute unprecedented period of history. The European Renaissance describes a period that led to the transformation of the way people think. It transformed the ignorance and the irrationality of the Dark Ages into the wonders of early modern society. For those who don't know, the Renaissance is viewed historically as the most significant era of scientific discovery and advance. That history is going to radically change. This Revolution Against Aging and Death conference aims to ignite a biomedical renaissance that will have an exponentially greater impact on societal and scientific thinking than did the European Renaissance of 700 years ago. Year 2015, that is the year the biomedical renaissance began. That is when the critical mass of people decided it's time to live forever. And the wealthy people are putting significant dollars into aging research. Not nearly enough, but they're doing it for the first time. And you think of wealthy people 20, 30 years ago, they didn't do these sort of things, but they are doing it. They're doing it in big ways. Mark Zuckerberg announced just 3 weeks ago, he's giving 99% of his fortune away, and he believes he's going to be able to cure virtually every disease that afflicts mankind. I mean, you never heard of that before. But that's where we're going, and it's coming from the young visionaries who have been remarkably successful and entrepreneurial and creative. They see it. We all know about Calico and Google. They're putting money into aging research. Harvard professor Dr. George Church, he believes, according to this Washington Post article, December 2015, he will be able to reverse biological aging within the next 5 years. Within the next 5 years, and he's rather well funded. We think he's got a good shot at doing it. So you talk about wanting to live longer so you can take advantage of future technologies. George Church is a guy who we're keeping a very close view on. We did an article about him in our magazine just a few months ago. So the media is picking up on the fact that people want to live a lot longer, that scientists think it can be done, and wealthy individuals are putting money into it, putting money into attempting to make people live forever. And this is in the conventional media. They're recognizing this biomedical renaissance. They can see what's happening before their eyes. Now, April 2015 Time magazine ran a cover which doesn't impress anyone in this room, because we know children born today, they're going to live a lot longer. They'll live a lot healthier. That's not what we need, though. People in this room need to see covers like this. That was the April-May issue of Forbes. An individual named Osman Kaibar, he is spending a lot of money, he's very wealthy, attempting to reverse aging in humans. This is what we want to see. The infants, they can fend for themselves. We, in this group, need to reverse our aging process. You have seen a number of people in this room, people on the stage, I should say, who are self-experimenting, including me. We are experimenting with therapies that we see are working in the animal model, and we're not going to wait for the FDA to prove it. We are going to put those therapies in our own body. You're going to hear two other speakers talk about that during this conference. So the scientists are growing impatient. They're seeing results in the laboratory, and they want those results for themselves. And one of those self-experimenters is Dipnarine Mahara. He's hooked up to an apheresis machine there. I've been on that bed 2 times, by the way, undergoing a stem cell therapy. So we're doing ourselves what we're filing applications with the FDA for now to get approval to do widespread clinical studies. 2015 again, that is the year the biomedical renaissance commenced. And the FDA approved the first clinical study to test a drug called metformin to see if it could slow down the pathological effects of aging. And the media, they exaggerated it by quite a bit. They're claiming that metformin by itself is going to enable people to live to be 120 years of age. These news headlines went all over the world, and we know that metformin is not going to do that by itself. It's a great drug, but it's not going to let you be 120 just by taking metformin. And one of the reasons we know that is, well, we've been studying it extensively. And what's happening right now is that seniors who heard about the study that this drug could enable people to live 120, they're scrambling to get into that study. This is an April 2015 Wall Street Journal reprint where it shows elderly people want to live longer, live healthier. And if you go back 30, 40 years, older people just said, well, it's just natural to go old and die, and why should we try to do anything about it? Well, this drug has enlightened enough people and motivated them to want to get into a clinical study. Now, LifeExtension recommended metformin as an anti-aging drug back in March of 1995. The FDA went literally berserk. They were threatening to re-indict us on new charges of helping people get medications that they had not yet approved of. We did not back down. We continued to recommend metformin in future issues of our magazine as an anti-aging therapy. My name, as you know, is Bill Falloon. I started the LifeExtension Foundation out of a little warehouse in Pompano Beach in 1977. I had some laboratory equipment, and I got a lot of media attention in the South Florida area. I was on every major talk show, newspapers. They loved to cover this weird person who was trying to find a way to not let people die. But from 1977 to 1980, absolutely no consumer interest. I'm looking at this room here thinking, wow, for 3 years I had zero, absolutely zero. Though if I went on a radio talk show, people would call in out of curiosity and ask the crazy questions that we all get asked. Why do you want to live forever? What about the population? Things like that. So I've been around doing this for a while. We do have a track record that goes back to essentially 1981 when we introduced DHEA as an anti-aging therapy. We again had to go to war with the FDA over that. 2 of our LifeExtension members were arrested for importing DHEA. We hired a lawyer immediately, bonded them out, and we won those cases. They didn't even go to trial, by the way. The FDA illegally had these people arrested, and we were able to show that they had no basis to do it. But that's the kind of battles we've had to fight. Low-dose aspirin. We recommended that to reduce the risk of ischemic stroke, coronary thrombosis, even cancer, and we battled the FDA for 15 years before they allowed a claim for something as simple as low-dose aspirin. Coenzyme Q10, FDA went berserk over that. They raided health food stores around the country before the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act was passed. So we've been at the forefront of bringing out technologies before the rest of the world finds out about them. And those 3 scientists that just spoke here, Dr. Maharaj, Dr. Kiproff, Dr. Fahey, we are working very hard to get them funding so that they can move this research forward so that we can all benefit. And some of our people, they want to participate as study participants. They want to be part of a study in an experimental situation. LifeExtension Foundation funds about $10 million every year on a wide variety of projects. We're committed to people like Dr. Fahey at 21st Century Medicine Laboratories and a number of other scientists working on cures for cancer, working on ways to slow down aging. We've got a number of ongoing projects with Dr. Maharaj, with Greg Fahey. So we're doing everything we can at LifeExtension to accelerate the progress. So if you wonder what we do with the surplus money we get from your dietary supplement sales, well, this is a big part of it. In addition to fighting the government, which is the other part of it, we are funding researchers. This is a little presentation I try to give anytime I talk to a group. And this is people who had a lot of money and they're missing the longevity boat that I think everyone in this room is aware is right in our grasp. In other words, a way to reverse aging. Someone with $220 million dying of gastric cancer, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And it's even more absurd when you have $3.5 billion and you die from leukemia complications. This does not make sense. And I could actually spend a whole night showing these slides, and these are just from the year 2015. 2015, these famous people with money did not use their money or their fame to do anything about the aging process that was killing them. $180 million, and you die of something like breast cancer? There's so much that can be done. And I didn't read about anything unique about some of these individuals. $4 billion. And some people might say, well, 98, that's pretty old. Well, around 85, he should have realized I'm growing old, need to do something about it. But as usual, very little was done. I don't know how someone can allow themselves to die when they have the financial resources to go to one of these 3 doctors and maybe pay them to do some experimental work or seek out other doctors. There's plenty of researchers out there. Instead, they'll go to a conventional medical center. They'll go to MD Anderson, Mayo, Sloan Kettering, and they feel they're going to the best. The Subway founder, he went to Yale University Medical School. Sounds real prestigious, doesn't it? He's dead in 2 years. So it really wasn't impressive to use big names to decide who's going to treat you. And just a week ago, an individual named Rudolph Mars Jr. He is the Mars of the M&M candy fortune. Net worth, $31 billion. He's dead at age 84. Now, maybe he did some good work. I can't say that any of these people didn't do the right thing, but for the most part, no one does. I don't see it in the way that researchers are being funded. How do you die with $31 billion from a chronic illness without doing something about it? My view is that at some point very soon, the people who have the financial resources to make a difference, when they die and they don't have any track record of trying to stop that death process, it's going to be viewed as a disgrace, as a humiliation, an embarrassment. It's going to be looked upon as moronic. Where an obituary says you're worth $31 billion, well, what did he do to stay alive? I mean, if he tried and failed, that's okay. But you just held on to that money while you're going downhill? It's absolutely absurd. And I believe the public will recognize that, and we hope the people who literally are in the upper 0.2% will realize they can now deploy a small fraction of what they have into research, and that research could keep them, their family, and the rest of humanity alive. So this is something that we're going to continue to advocate everywhere we go, the urgent need to conduct human age reversal research. Dr. Fahey's doing it right now. Dr. Maharaj is doing it right now with the grant that we made. Dr. Kiprov is doing it to some extent. They all need, though, more money. And the fact that these people with these billions, tens of billions of dollars aren't rushing to them shocks me, absolutely shocks me. If we succeed, even modestly, at reversing biological aging, we spare Medicare from insolvency. So there is a role for the government to play here. In fact, I envision a time when a person turns 70 and has a number of health conditions. Medicare says, you undergo one of these age reversal treatments or we're not going to pay for anything because you're going to cost us $250,000. And we can do one of these age reversal treatments for maybe $8,000. If you see what I'm saying, the government's going to mandate that people, if they're going to get government money when they get sick and there's not enough money in Medicare to take care of everyone, will use age reversal. And then you spare Medicare. Yeah, decades potentially, decades of healthy life to everyone's lifespan. And as you heard earlier, all we need to live is a couple decades, and then we reach the singularity. So we have a real incentive to live a couple more decades. So you heard some people talking about the young blood transfer. It's really young plasma transfer is what we're looking at. A number of studies substantiate that when young blood is transferred into old animals, the older animals grow systemically younger. GDF11 is a protein that I believe the Harvard researchers are still interested in ascertaining whether or not it by itself can induce age reversal. You're going to hear a speaker at this conference who is using GDF11 on himself, and I believe a small group of other people trying to get a jump on what may be a technology. We don't know yet if GDF11 by itself is going to work. It's one of those 700 proteins in young blood, and it's one of the proteins that may have some rejuvenating effects. Fibroblast growth factor 21 is a hormone. present again in young blood. As we get older, it diminishes. So we feel that getting that young plasma into older people might give them the entire set of proteins, cytokines, exosome, paracrine factors, all the good stuff that's in young blood, get that into those older people to see if we cannot reverse their biological aging. There's a number of studies, and again, the publication of these started around 2015, many journals showing that the parabiosis has a meaningful and systemic reversal effect of aging. Most of the organ systems studied, they were able to identify reversals of the pathological processes associated with aging in response to the parabiosis research. That's why we're so excited by what Dr. Kiprov is doing, by what Dr. Maharal is putting together. We're impressed. We want to see if it works. If it doesn't work, we tried and failed. We move on to the next target. So this is the way I live my life, by the way. If something may work, we're going to try it somewhere. But the neat thing is, it's no longer just LifeExtension out there on the edge. We've got Harvard, Cambridge, some of the most prestigious medical institutions in this country looking at parabiosis research and wanting to apply it to human beings. And Johnson & Johnson, big pharmaceutical company, they want to see if it cannot be a treatment for Alzheimer's disease. And based on one of the presentations you just saw here, there's a high likelihood that it may help dissolve the amyloid beta that clogs up old brain cells and renders them dysfunctional. So what we know today, old blood is dangerous, and when young blood is put into old animals, well, it makes them younger. Simple. Young blood rejuvenates old animals. We want to see if it works in human beings. Now, I like to try to use historic analogies wherever I can. If young blood really does rejuvenate older people, we may have no idea which one of those 700 proteins is responsible for it. But you look at what happened with smallpox. They discovered a vaccine that would prevent the disease from ever occurring in a person before they knew a virus existed. They did not know of the variola virus. They didn't know of any viruses. There was a big controversy back then as whether or not germs cause disease. There was a debate about that. And yet, Edward Jenner pushed forward, developed a cowpox vaccine, and by 1840, it was eradicated. Smallpox was eradicated in England, where universal vaccine was available, and they had no idea of what caused smallpox. Well, we're in rather better shape here today. I say that because we know a lot more about aging today than what our ancestors did about smallpox. We know about multiple mechanisms that cause us to age, and we know how to at least circumvent some of these mechanisms or suppress them altogether in some cases. So we know what's causing us to age, and we can take some steps now, but the eventual reality we're seeking, of course, is the abolition of aging. So it took 3,000 years for them to figure out how to get rid of smallpox. 3,000 years. We can't wait that long. We need to eliminate pathological aging right now. So another historic analogy. I love history, by the way. Scurvy, I was taught in my high school history books that once they discovered citrus would prevent or cure scurvy, then everyone started using citrus and it went away. But that's not the case. First recorded use of a citrus fruit was some Portuguese sailors in 1497. They were able to cure scurvy using citrus. And then a couple hundred years go by. And a British, or actually a Scottish physician, Mr. Lind, Dr. Lind, he did a human study. He proved citrus could cure scurvy. He did a study, proved it, published it, and it took the British over 50 years to mandate the citrus. The sailors were dying needlessly after a human clinical study was published. That is happening today, by the way. Lots of good information in the published literature, very little of it used to save human lives. But if you look at the fact that they discredited the citrus cure in 1870. And they did that because they used oxidized lime juice as the active ingredient. And when lime juice oxidizes, the vitamin C disappears. So they weren't getting any result. So in 1870, they said, don't bother with those limes anymore. It doesn't work. Whatever Dr. Lind did back in 1740, that's really irrelevant right now. We're looking here at maybe just shorter voyages, doing what we can. And even the Arctic trip that Dr. Robert Scott made, he was a Royal Navy physician. He didn't think to bring any kind of anti-scurvy therapy. And so it was not until 1932 400 years after some Portuguese sailors discovered how to prevent and cure scurvy, that they finally said, now we've identified it. And the analogy here is that just like with the aging, we think young blood may rejuvenate old people. We don't know what exactly in that young blood may do it, but if you were a sailor back in 1740 and you just saw a study done where citrus was curing scurvy, you sure would want to bring a supply with you, wouldn't you? Well, for a long voyage, and yet virtually none of them did. They just ignored it. And that's one of the dilemmas we face. And this is a real scary situation. The parabiosis research, it actually peaked around 1972. They were consistently reversing aging in animals, and then it fell off a cliff, and it got restarted around 2012. That is what concerns us more than anything else, that we could have some great concepts talked about here, and then it's forgotten. People decide we don't have to worry about it anymore. Albert Einstein is an individual responsible for the GPS that we have. He had no idea that his mastery of the mathematics and the physical universe was going to enable GPS to be discovered, but it did. And the reason Einstein's work is so relevant is it enables time to be measured, communications time to be measured in billionths of a second. Isn't that amazing? Well, I think there are people of Albert Einstein's category, of his intellect, here, right now, willing to do studies that may reverse aging. And I sure hope it doesn't happen because of lack of funding. That would be a scary thought. That would be an absolutely frightening thought. So we know that people have had concepts in the past, but they were lacking the tools, the imagination, the resources to get it done. So we need to change what's perceived impossible right now by most people to the routine. Change it to the absolute routine. And what we're going to do is overcome the dogmatic inertia that is so prevalent when someone proposes a novel concept. There is all of this skepticism, cynicism, and the project is crippled because of people not willing to accept new ideas. Every time a new medical discovery was proposed, the cynics always outweighed the innovators. And yet, once it became accepted, well, people said, well, of course you do defibrillation. Of course you do CPR. Of course we do heart transplants. But that's not the way it was in the beginning. So what we want to do is make human age reversal an obligation of the medical community. We want them to feel it's... We want them to feel just as much need to take an elderly person and enable them to grow younger as they would if someone had a cardiac arrest in their office. Well, of course you're going to do CPR. If you've got a defibrillator, of course you're going to shock that heart back into a good rhythm. And if the heart really is in bad shape and you have an available transplant, well, of course you do a transplant. And if an old person is getting old, make them young. It's going to happen. I was looking for one word that I could use to describe myself if I failed to do anything at all about disease, aging, and death. If I spent my whole life just hoping somebody else would do something so that I could just take a lot of vacation time, take a lot of days off, watch a lot of TV, keep the money for myself, not spend the $175 million, I would feel ashamed if I contracted a situation. And before I would wind up in this situation, a terrible predicament, because you don't really know at that point, you're in this predicament. An ICU unit. We have so many people who call us and they want to join LifeExtension after their father is in an ICU. And they think we can do something to reverse that. Well, for the most part, we're unable to because our recommendations are ignored by the conventional doctors. Some of these individuals, they last for months in an ICU. They're immune compromised for the most part. They go in there with a bacterial infection, they wipe out the bacteria, and then they develop a fungal infection because their immune system can't fight off the fungus. So they wipe out the fungus, another bacterial infection comes in. So they've got pneumonia, septicemia, they die a horrible death. And if I'm ever in this position, I will always at least have, with whatever thinking capacity exists in my brain, I gave it my all. I didn't just let it happen, I fought it all the way. And I know you all might not all agree with me, but I really believe if you're going to go down fighting. Don't just let nature take its course. That's not the way we do things at LifeExtension. So again, an urgent need for human age reversal studies. Must make this happen. Now here's the dilemma. How biomedical research is typically funded. You've got brilliant scientists who don't have a lot of money. So they need to find donors, need to find venture capitalists. And for the most part, be it a government grant or an individual donor or a company, they pay all the financial costs. That's the way it has to work. And unfortunately, a lot of promising scientific studies never even get up off the ground because the money just never manifested, or it was withdrawn right in the middle of the study. This is the tragedy. So what we've done to go beyond what LifeExtension has been able to do is set up a company called Age Reversal Therapeutics. The objective is to raise a very small amount of money from very wealthy, accredited investors only. No one can invest in this unless they have a lot of money. But the idea is we feel we have 5,000 to 10,000 of those accredited investors already on our membership list, and we have indications. They've emailed us saying we want to fund Dr. Maharaj's study, we want to fund some of these other studies, and I said, well, let's try to do this right. And unfortunately, we have something called the Securities and Exchange Commission, an SEC, that I had to deal with for the last 12 months in order to get this company legally established, because the SEC loves to throw you in jail if one piece of paper is out of place. So we got the company established. At the LifeExtension booth are the private placement memorandums. And there's enough here for a lot of people. But the only people that can put money into this are really the upper 0.5% of 1% as far as I'm concerned. I've had a number of people, by the way, want to write checks to this, and their net worth may be $300,000, $500,000. I refuse to take their money. I won't take money from people on a speculative type investment because we are going to fund age reversal research. If it works, company's going to do great. If it fails, well, we spent $25 million and we know what doesn't work. So I'm only seeking people with substantial net worths to put money into this and get it up off the ground. We feel $25 million will enable us to launch 4 to 6 of these age reversal projects, keep them funded for the next 2 or 3 years, and see what kind of results we get. We are going to be very meticulous about the results. We're going to make these payments in milestones. If they don't recruit enough study subjects in the proper amount of time that they're given, if they're not getting the results we're seeking in the early phases, we're going to cut it off and we're going to jump to something else. We're not just going to put money into a technology that is obviously failing. So we're going to have a little bit of a different way of doing this. So connecting the dots. You've got brilliant scientists, brilliant physician scientists. That's Dr. Maharaj and Dr. Kiproff. They are physician scientists. They're medical doctors and they're scientists. But we've got all these people in the scientific community. We've got the interest, as evidenced by the people in this group right now. We've got very wealthy people who have far more money than what they're ever going to need, and so many times they forget about the 40% federal estate tax, meaning upon their death, federal government comes in and takes 40%. Maybe use a little bit of that to fund aging research so you don't die and pay that 40% tax. So we need to connect the dots. That's our objective. Now this is a little Pac-Man diagram that we did, and it shows what has to happen when someone conceives of a hypothesis. The great news is we're way beyond the hypothesis, cell study, small animal study. We're now at the proof of concept human study, or even a full-blown clinical study. We're working on an IND, so the FDA hopefully approves it so we can do some of this. Greg Fahey is already doing the research at Stanford, so he's already very far ahead as far as being able to reverse aging. But the bottom line is every step of that process requires money. There's no other way to get it done without some money being put in. In the beginning, it can be a small amount of money. We've done cellular studies funded by LifeExtension with Biotime, where we were able to reverse aging in a human cell. That was unprecedented. We did that, I think, around 2009, 2010. But of course, to get it all the way up to an age reversal therapy takes a lot of money and a lot of time. But nonetheless, that's kind of how it works. So our plan, as far as how we plan to do this, is to ask people who are able to financially and want to live longer. We really want to get to people who desire this technology. But frankly, if a wealthy person comes in and just says, well, I'll speculate, that's fine too. Put money into this company. By the way, I have 0 ownership in this company. Please understand, it is illegal for me to have an equity ownership in this company because it's primarily owned by the nonprofit LifeExtension Foundation. There cannot be a private benefit to anyone involved with life extension when it comes to raising money and doing research. So this is a very unusual presentation. I'm talking about raising money, and I don't have any stake in it. Whether we raise 25 million, whether it makes 100 million or makes nothing, I personally don't have any financial interest. It has taken up about half of my time to put this together over the last 12 months. So it means you do without your social life, you give up your vacations, you give up almost every day off, because I have another job to do, running the Life Extension Buyers Club. So I have to do both. And the only way to do both is you give up everything else to focus on what you need to do. The good news is it's done, it's set up, it's established. So what we plan to do is identify the scientists who have promising proposals that may result in biological age reversal. That's the first step. Identify them, and we think we've already identified a number of them, including the 3 that you just saw up on the stage. We're helping Greg Fahey out, by the way, with those MRI evaluations, and we're helping Dr. Maharaj out in different ways, and we're trying to work Dr. Kiproff to get him up off the ground. We want to see these scientists funded so that they can do their research and keep them in the laboratory, not trying to raise money. And unfortunately, they wind up doing a lot of that. So once we identify the scientist, we provide the money. That's a critical component to make the research work. And if any of the research is fruitful, it will yield money, which will go back to the company. And the way the company is structured now, there will be a marketing attempt to get lots of people to use the age reversal technology. And we're doing that for a lot of reasons. We want to be a catalyst. We want to be like the first .com company that generates general interest, where someone else is going to say, I want to set up a business like that too, because look at all the money they're making. And if we get a couple hundred companies competing to make you younger again, that's good news. That is good news. We want to reward investors, because if people see that happen, they're going to say, wow, let's go after the next company that wants to reverse aging. Big Pharma will jump into it. Lots of people will jump into it once they start seeing money. And of course, continue the research. My mission would be to use most of the funds, if possible, to keep funding research. But I do want to reward the investors, as I said, to set that track record. Once you start making money, you become a hero. Look how easy it is to raise $25 million. Now, this is not 1977 anymore. It's not 1980. Life Extension has about 300,000 people that we mail our magazine to, or they log onto our website if they don't want the paper used. We have about that many. I think we have 5,000 to 10,000 of those accredited investors. And they have expressed an interest that they don't want to die. They want to be made young again. And it would be a rather disgraceful situation if only 100 of them put up 250,000. Because that would mean those other thousands are just going to sit back and hope somebody else does it. And if they do it, then they'll get the benefit without having to risk anything. I'm hoping, frankly, we get more than 1,000 people. And at that point, we can say, well, you're only going to be allowed to put in 25,000. Or maybe a little bit more. We can take in up to 30 million maybe. But nonetheless, I'm hoping that the community, the life extension community, will understand that this is a joint effort. You can't just go out and call someone like Peter Thiel. He's given about $6 million to SENS, and no other billionaires seem to want to write those checks, though SENS is getting some interesting donations now that Aubrey can tell you about. But the point is, it's not appropriate to go pester a billionaire who is spending money on research and think, well, he'll spend money on my project too, when there's all those other billionaires out there sitting back and doing nothing. It just isn't fair. So it's the way I view it. So if you look at how conventional funding is raised, you go to an investment bank, and then they will take your offering through their system, and they'll have their brokers sell your stock, and you got to pay all these commissions. So if we try to raise $25 million the conventional way, 7 to 10% comes right off the top. Right off the top. The company doesn't get all the money. And we want all this money to be able to fund all the research that we intend to employ. So the virtue of going to longevity enthusiasts is that I hope their interest is sufficient enough, and that the ones with the substantial net worths will put money into this organization. So I'm going to wrap this up real fast. And let me see, how many more slides do we have? The critical mass, we've reached it. We've reached the critical mass. And again, we are funding $10 million a year. Can't do any more than that, by the way, at this stage. That's the most Life Extension can do. So we're going to try to get the accredited investors who want to live a long time to join and amalgamate their resources. And that is the end of my presentation.